It's a river you don't see. You can see it at bridge crossings, but that's about it.
People either don't know about the river or they see the river within this concrete channel with chain link fencing keeping them away. It becomes mocked as basically a sewage corridor.
I think that there is a really huge disconnect between the river in Pocatello and the community that surrounds it.
What have we lost here? What's the possible benefit to us as a community from the river as a functioning ecosystem?
The Portneuf River flows for about 100 miles, starting on the Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Highlands, and runs past the natural hot springs at Lava Hot Springs. The river gets squeezed into irrigation canals and then meanders through the Portneuf Valley and into the city of Pocatello. Flooding in the early and mid-1900s convinced local citizens and the Army Corps of Engineers that the Portneuf River had to be tamed. And within the city of Pocatello, they did it with a flood control project.
In the city, it's channelized in a concrete channel about 40 feet wide, concrete box for 1.6 miles. And then on either end of that are earthen levees with rock riprap along the banks. So there's no vegetation, there's no sinuosity, it's straight, it's channelized, and not really a river.
Those levees have worked wonderfully over 50 plus years, but they're unsightly and they don't let the river purify itself as it flows through the city. So the city of Pocatello, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, have initiated a year-long study to rethink the levees that they built 50 years ago.
We formed a working group of about 30 citizens, folks who live along the river, those with expertise.
And our scientists in the MILES program at Idaho State University have contributed information on the water quality, the water quantity, and survey information on what people prefer to this consortium that's called the Portneuf Vision.
There are a lot of people who know we have a river but don't know a lot about the river. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're actually studying the river.
The aim is to provide a vision plan that's somewhat analogous to a land use or zoning plan for a community, but that is centered up on the river corridor itself, and that is both built from the community's vision, but also has been informed by the combination of social and ecological science.
For the MILES project, I worked with a number of other social scientists here at Idaho State University. What we wanted to do was learn how the public viewed the river and what they also wanted to see in the future. So one of the things we're hoping to do is educate and fill in the gaps for both the public and stakeholders.
Over several months, MILES scientists surveyed stakeholders and the general public. MILES scientists also developed mobile apps so the citizens could be actively engaged in data collection.
What we're trying to do is allow ordinary citizens to provide us with their perceptions in an open-ended format, but through this map. So when they go to a specific place that they really like, it's a great fishing hole, it's a great place to walk, it's a great place to see the sunset, they can actually open the app, say, I'm gonna add to the MILES community map that I know about, and I'm going to click a point and say, okay, this one is a really important point. And that comes back to us as researchers.
This little area right here, for example, I believe is where people were looking at the electrical box that happened to be right there on the way toward the bridge.
Many people have come together and said, you know, this is an eyesore, this is something that we need to change.
So one of the things we've done is create a website that tries to tell the story of the Portneuf and share what we know about the Portneuf River. We've got a watershed tour. We've got science that talks about the science of the water quality in the Portneuf, riparian health, as well as recreational uses. And when we talk about the floods, we know where the floods happen and we have visuals of them. That's been a big part of working closely with ISU.
Using technology, MILES researchers are not only informing residents about their river, its past and present, but also scientists are helping area residents see how their river could be transformed.
I was using the input of parcel data and land use data and work is put into a model, and then we can project different kind of scenario of the city development. They want to see what is the future of the city, what is the future of the river, and our model will be able to provide different kind of scenarios to them. So they see, well, using this kind of a policy, our city is going to be moving toward this direction. And using another kind of policy and regulation, our city is going to move to the other direction. And then they participate in the process. They can send in their comments. Do they like it or not?
And because the Portneuf River is essential to the area's agricultural community, Miles scientists reached out to area ranchers and farmers.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about how you and your immediate family got into the farming business?
Yeah, sure. So
Farmers are important because they use 85% of the water in the state of Idaho, and also because they're a big part of our economic base. So one of the main goals of the EPSCoR Miles project is to provide science-based decision-making tools to help sustainably manage Idaho's resources.
It's important for scientists to understand what motivates farmers and how they see their role in being stewards of the land. It takes time for people to develop the trust for each other. And farmers and scientists, this is one way that they can build trust with each other, is by having an opportunity to communicate.
So as important as it is to have a vision for what the river should look like as it passes through Pocatello, it's also important to improve or measure the quality of water that passes through the Portneuf. We know that the Portneuf is a muddy river, and one reason it's muddy is because of the contribution by a tributary stream, Marsh Creek, which is located 10 or 20 miles upstream. We're going to send a team of scientists into Marsh Creek to determine why that stream is so muddy.
In the late 1970s, Marsh Creek was ranked as one of the 22 most impaired streams in Idaho. Years of agricultural practices marked and changed the creek.
So as part of the Miles project, not only are we investigating how people interact with the river, but we're also assessing the health of the river. One of the main goals is to understand why there's so much sediment going into the Portneuf. Sediment has lasting effects for communities downstream. Sediment itself is a vector. It carries along pathogens and things like that. And so by reducing the amount of sediment coming in from Marsh Creek, we have the ability to improve ecosystem health along the entire remaining length of the Portneuf.
Yeah, just set the location. So now you guys are
You're going to go every meter?
Go every meter.
And this is not the first time that this has been done. Studies of water quality in Marsh Creek have been done for many decades. But one of the things that we're doing that's unique is we are measuring at multiple locations along the river. And by measuring at many different locations along the main stem, we can identify hot spots where more sediment might be being generated than other locations. We're finding that there are roughly 3 potential sources of how the land has been managed and how we've altered the land. First, the livestock access to the riverbanks that can cause erosion. The second is the construction of levees, which eliminates floodplains and marshes. And the third is a large pond that's in the upper part of Marsh Creek called the Rat Pond, where there's ability for sediment to be generated and moved downstream. If we know where those hot spots are, then we can better target future conservation to improve on those hot spots of sediment source.
Miles scientists also work with local ranchers and farmers to better understand their conservation efforts and how they perceive water quality.
I've never met a landowner that wakes up in the morning and says, I wonder what I can destroy today. They rely on the ground and they rely on the water to make their living. I think this project is going to be really neat. It's gaining more information about water quality. It's going to gain information maybe about runoff events, maybe where some of the problematic areas are. And then it's going to allow us maybe to know what practices we can install to better improve water quality.
Improving water quality does more than just reduce sediment levels. Miles research could lead the way to other improvements.
Our Miles project is looking at the changes in the occurrence and distribution of amphibians and reptiles in the Portneuf drainage. Well, what we've learned is that in the lower part of the drainage, about 25 to 30% of the species are no longer occur. I think that there's a potential for wetland restoration in the lower Portneuf area where you could have places like this. So there's hints, of what we could have in the future.
The City of Pocatello, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Portneuf Working Group met together. They reviewed all of the collected data, the social science research, and the public input to make recommendations for how the City Council could put the Portneuf vision into action. And it happened with Miles scientists at the center of the process.
I think that that people like to see, particularly in public agencies, different branches working together, that it makes for better use of public dollars, that we're out here really to come out with the best service to the public of Southeast Idaho.
In today's world, a lot of policy is made, of course, from surveys, because they want to know what the voting public believes, but also based off of scientific numbers. So when you can take that scientific data, present it to the public, and get the public's opinion on that scientific data, you end up with an area of understanding that can then just play right into policy and management practices for the river region itself.
There's no one else out there who has the time or expertise to measure the quality of the ecosystem or the needs and wants of the people in the community. And so we have collected that data. We've talked amongst one another across our disciplines to understand what these data might mean and pass along the results to our partners and stakeholders.
Miles research has been integral because we don't have big, deep pockets. And so having Miles come in, it just made it happen now, just getting to a point where we can actually think about implementation and better understand what would work a lot faster.
While the Portneuf research mission is to answer the scientific questions needed to help craft the Portneuf vision, the impact of this work has benefits beyond improving just one river.
As part of the Miles project, there are students that are involved from the grade school level to grade school teachers to undergraduate research assistants to graduate students to postdocs to new faculty. And we're all doing something that we've never done before. The Miles project is really hitting that sweet spot of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary science by bringing together not only a bunch of different participants across age groups, across backgrounds, local stakeholders, but also building infrastructure for doing research at our university by marching us down a path that we've never had an opportunity to do before.
I think that the educational component of the Miles project has been one of the ones that's been most successful.
I've met a lot of people that I wouldn't have otherwise, and it's reinforced a lot of things that I've learned in classes up to this point in my education, and really just given me a feel for what my future holds as far as a career.
I think that a lot of the projects that graduate students are doing within the scope of the Miles project are really providing some of the key data that is being used to guide decisions in terms of the visioning projects here in the Portneuf.
In the future, when I'm hopefully crafting policy, that I can understand those things, have hard facts along with, whatever tribal beliefs that we have to protect our homelands.
The Miles project has allowed me to use my planning and GIS skills to try to find ways to grow Pocatello more sustainably into the future.
Miles has made a huge difference to this university because for the first time we have biologists talking to geologists, talking to political scientists and sociologists and historians in a way that was never done before. And this team of scientists is not only well suited to solve problems like the Portneuf River, but for years to come, the relationships we've developed will allow the same team of scientists to study other services associated with rivers or with crops or with timber, all of which are important to the state of Idaho.